Session 7. Investing in the future, empowering the younger generations through education and mobility. Moderator, Claire Moody, former member of the European Parliament, UK. Speakers, Irina Abuladze, Deputy Minister of Education, Science, Culture and Sport of Georgia. Nino Javakhadze, Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs of Georgia. Yevgeny Shostakov, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Belarus. Lawrence Meredith, Director Neighborhood East, DG NEAR. Ola Henriksson, Regional Director of IOM's Regional Office for the EU, Norway and Switzerland.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming back into the session so promptly. I am going to start this session now, precisely because we have a limited amount of time, where lunch is due at 1 p.m. and consequently we only have an hour and a quarter for what I think is going to be a very interesting panel. We are looking at young people and education and mobility, and clearly the speakers are going to identify a number of the benefits that we get from education and mobility, that young people in Georgia get from education and mobility. But there are also concerns and issues that I think we need to look at this morning too. There is one that comes up regularly when we talk about this issue, which is that of brain drain. How do we ensure that those benefits are kept in Georgia as well as shared from Georgia to the rest of the EU? But also, how do we then make sure that those benefits are shared across the whole of Georgia, so that they are shared geographically across all parts of Georgia, but also economically all parts of Georgia. So those people from all economic backgrounds also equally share in those benefits of education and mobility. So given the shortness of time, and without me going on, because I am actually not officially one of the speakers, I would like to hand over to the panel who you have already had an introduction to. But I will ask Irina first, and I will ask all of the speakers to have short contributions initially, so that we can hear from audience members and have questions from the floor too. But Irina Abuladze, who is Deputy Minister of Education, Science, Culture and Sport. Please, first contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very glad to have this opportunity to speak about the progress made in past couple of months with regards to the education reforms initiated by the Prime Minister last year in September, and of course to highlight the importance of the Eastern Partnership collaboration to enhance the potential of our citizens and to provide the opportunities to not only Georgian citizens but to Eastern Partnership country students to better education, employment and research, of course. As you all know, last year in September, in the frames of the new national idea, the goal to enhance the human capital in Georgia, the Prime Minister declared the initiative to increase the funding of education, but not only education in neuro perspective, but as a whole, and human capital in this country by 6% of spending of GDP by 2022. And recently, just a couple of weeks ago, this initiative has been resulted in the changes in the legislation in respective law, which means better opportunities and ambitious steps forwards to increase and enhance the quality in education in all fields, starting from the primary level to the higher education and science. So on the general education level, we speak about the development of infrastructure, of course, in capital city, but most importantly in the regions, to provide more opportunities to the vulnerable groups to obtain the high quality education. The results of the recent PISA evaluation, they show that Georgia has considerably improved in achievements in our 15-year-old students by 40 points in comparison to the earlier evaluation. But when you look at the statistics, more close, you see that this improvement is more due to the capital city schools and private schools, which means that we need to do more to students that are in the regions and in small villages. That's why the new reform agenda really puts an emphasis on the inclusive education, and of course providing more and more opportunities to regional schools and particularly small-sized schools where we have the deficit of the qualified teachers and administrative staff. So this will be the priority, and I'm happy to mention the new initiative and support from EU to open up the new European school, the first ever European school outside the EU in Tbilisi, in Georgia, and which will provide the opportunity to not only Georgian students, but all Eastern Partnership country students to obtain the European education in Tbilisi. We already have the pilot phase now going on, and we will be launching the second phase in September, announcing the new building infrastructure, launching, etc., etc. So thank you for that. And here we have the representatives of the first phase school, and I'm sure there will be opportunity to present what they, how they feel about this school. The higher education, which is important, and science and innovations. So as you know, Georgia got the sixth place among the Erasmus Plus countries in the scholarships this year, which means that we do have the potential for the global competition. It means that the special window opening, which happened last year, the additional 6 million euros provided by EU was actually the decision based on our competition and based on our results, and we are ready to obtain more. We are ready to absorb more with our students and researchers to ensure high level of the research and students' mobility. I think the new wave of the reforms, which concentrates more on the internationalization and mobility of the students, of the researchers, and the new EU-supported project, which has been signed in November while we were with the high-level visit with the Prime Minister, new EU initiative, second phase in the skills development and skills match, which will enable to prepare our workforce better for the future, not only to be competitive on the Georgian market, but outside Georgia, because the new reform agenda, of course, of the government is to ensure the mobility of the workforce, to ensure the competition and the better employability and better chances to the future. And of course, last but not least, the science and innovation. And we have the huge opportunity in Erasmus Plus project and Horizon 2020. And we now discussing how Georgia can serve better to the region and Eastern Partnership countries through JITA and Ministry of Education and Ministry of Economy's collaboration to enhance innovation and commercialization of the science. Just recently, Georgia got admitted in ENCA, which is the Education Quality National Center, and now we are in the process to become part of EURAXIS, which is the pan-European platform for research networking. So this is the way, this is the aim, to become members of the international and EU organizations which deal with the education and science, and I'm sure that with more support from EU and more initiatives and enthusiasm from our part, we will enable to provide European quality education and science for Georgian citizens, but what importantly most for the EAP countries. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Irina. And now I would like to ask Nino Javakadze, who is Deputy Minister of Internal Affairs in Georgia, to talk a little more, and particularly about the experience of visa liberalization, which I know was a lengthy and interesting process.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm delighted to be here today to speak about this very important issue. Indeed, one of the four freedoms, the free movement of people and the mobility, is very important to promote the people-to-people contacts and to promote deeper relationships in multiple areas, including social, economic, cultural, educational fields, and etc. And in this regard, when it comes to a better mobility opportunities, the visa-free travel with European Union is indeed the greatest achievement so far for Georgia, and I would say the most tangible, because this is something that every citizen can embrace right away and can freely basically share European values, see European culture and feel it on spot, and it's not something that you have to wait for future. So this is very important for Georgia. And indeed, since the visa-free travel entered into force, Georgia's population support towards Georgia's European integration increased dramatically. And last polls actually show that around more than 80% of Georgian population supports Georgia's membership to European Union, which shows basically that this is not a political choice of the country, but basically it's a choice of almost every citizen of Georgia, which is very important. Since the visa-free travel entered into force, over 400,000 Georgian citizens traveled to European Union, Schengen area, and the total number of visits are almost 800,000. And most of the people strictly adhered to all the rules of the visa-free travel. However, we also know that there are problems and challenges in this regard, and we are closely following all those problems. We work on a multilateral level, on EU level, as well as bilaterally with the most affected countries on all the challenges, in particular when it comes to increased number of asylum seekers. On our side, we ensure that together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that people do understand what is the benefit, but also risks when you violate the rules of the visa-free travel. That visa-free travel is basically designed for short-term visits and not for basically for labor migration. For that purpose, the government is actively working with European Union on so-called circular migration, which is also another very important issue that opens new opportunities for Georgian population. But to sum up, basically, I would say that the visa-free travel is a landmark achievement for Georgia, together with the association agreement with European Union, which basically opened a new page in Georgia-EU relations and made actually Georgia already feel itself part of European family. Thank you.
Thank you, Nino. And next we have a speaker from Belarus, who's Evgeny Shestakov, who is the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs. And I think particularly you're going to pick up on the issue that of concern to a lot of people, I think, which is that around brain drain. And thank you, Evgeny. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. Since, let's say, I try to focus on the matters that are closer to me, since I'm Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs. We'll try to speak about brain drain problems that are quite, let's say, common for the region, and migration development situation with migration in Belarus. So first of all, just about brain drain problems and brain drain prevention. I try to, let's say, tell about our own experience in prevention of IT specialist brain drain in Belarus. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we started creating our high technology park, just to create conditions for our IT specialists not to leave the country, because you know IT at present is a free convertible thing. You can work everywhere in the world, but the focus was made just on creating such conditions for our young specialists. They will have no necessity to leave Belarus and to work Belarus and to have the salary that will be equal for their salary in the United States, in the European Union, etc. So it was achieved by a number of things. First of all, taxation rate. Another thing is a special stipendiums for the students that will work in this park just in future. And the third thing is a cooperation, let's say, governmental to private partnership, and that finally ended that this year our high technology park exported software products and IT services for more than $1.4 billion. That's Belarus nowadays exports the highest amount of such services in the world per capita. So that is the example how to create special conditions for, let's say, high convertible professions and occupations. As it was a joke that it was always two farmers that were, let's say, breeding ducks. One farmer is quite successful, another is not. So that is not successful asks how to manage to be like you. He said, you still have to nourish your ducks. Another thing, migration questions. We still have visa regime with European Union countries, and you know this. From, let's say, migration risk point of view, Belarus is a low-risk country because we have the smallest percentage of Schengen visa denials. But at the same time, amount of long-term visas, Schengen visas, we are leaders in this amount. So still we are traveling very actively throughout the whole Europe. Understanding that mobility is vital for our population, for our youth, for our professionals, just we undertook our unilateral steps, and now citizens of about 80 countries can, including European member states, can enter Belarus visa-free for up to 30 days. We're still developing this process, and I believe in the we will improve another things in the nearest future. Thank you.
Thank you, Evgeny. And our next speaker is a long-standing friend and supporter of Georgia as well, who is Lawrence Meredith, who is Director of Neighbourhood East, DG NEAR, and again going to talk about the support that the EU, how the EU works with Eastern partner countries and supporting youth and mobility. Please, Lawrence.
Claire, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'm really excited to be on this panel because listening to the Prime Minister of Georgia and President Tusk yesterday, they both spoke about new opportunities. And I think, honestly, this is the most exciting panel because new opportunities is about investing in youth and investing in the future. So we on the side, you know, in November 2017, when the leaders of the Eastern Partnership and of the European Union met for the last time, the biggest commitment they took was a 340 million euro package on youth and education. And they did that because they agree that the most important thing we can do is invest in a common future, is to invest in youth. And I'm really glad to share with you some of the highlights of what we're doing in this field. And more than share with you, we've actually brought them to you because the best single projects we have are, Irina already mentioned, you know, Georgia stepped up to say they'd like to host the first European school ever outside the European Union. And at the time, and nobody's saying this now, many doubted that it was possible. No, 60 years, we've never done that, we don't do that. But Commissioner Hahn had a vision, and Georgia shared that vision. And the vision was for a school, not just for Georgia, but for the Eastern Partnership as a whole. And that brings together 30 of the brightest and the best from all different regions, inclusiveness, across the 6 countries of the Eastern Partnership. And that's hosted in Tbilisi. But that's just the flagship of our work on youth and education. And we also have here present in the room, and I'm sure we're going to hear from them later, some of our 500 young European ambassadors that we put in place, who are really brilliant young people speaking out as to why the Eastern Partnership and cooperation with the European Union really matters to them. And I think what I really want to say is, it seems to me that there are 3 pillars of our work on this. Firstly, education. And one of the greatest successes of the European Union is undoubtedly Erasmus, celebrated 30 years. And now we're extending working with Erasmus also in the Eastern Partnership countries. We're looking to step it up to make it even more inclusive. And that's a really important thing. 80,000 have been involved in Erasmus exchanges in the Eastern Partnership. That's a fantastic achievement. And equally, but the second thing is about inclusiveness. And there, I would say 2 things. Not just higher education, it's very much about vocational education and training and strengthening the links between the labor market, because what young people want is jobs. And so what we need to do is to help them. And that's why when Commissioner Hahn took office 5 years ago, he said, you need to go, when you go to the countries, get out of the capitals and get to the regions. And I'm proud to say that across the Eastern Partnership, together with the governments, we've identified focal regions. Here in Georgia, that would be Guria, Imereti, Kakheti, and Racha. But we've got them across the whole Eastern Partnership. And that's about acting local. And this comes to my third and final point, which is about communicating. I think we need to invest in youth because they're simply better communicators. You know, when I try and turn on my iPhone, my 3 boys laugh. So, I mean, I don't know what I'm doing with it. I can't get any of the potential of the machine to work. But our young European ambassadors are a kind of Eastern Partnership iPhone, because we take them to our events. And, you know, I'm trying to learn Georgian, but I'm not making quite slow progress. And young European ambassadors come from each of the 6 countries, speak the languages, can get out into the regions and really communicate the benefits of the European Union. So education, inclusiveness, and communication. Thank you.
And Lawrence, I think you were speaking to the young ambassadors earlier on, and indeed, I think at this point, we'll move on to Ola, but we will also hear from one of the young ambassadors as well in a very short period. So our final speaker on the platform is Ola Henriksson, who is the Regional Director of the International Organization on Migration for the Regional Office of EU, Norway and Switzerland. And you obviously have very close involvement in what is a really important issue, but is also one that is often the subject of controversy in a number of countries. And look forward to hearing your perspective on that. And for example, on a point that is welcomed by a lot of us, but also has indeed been the subject of a lot of negative discussion and debate as well, which is the Compact on Migration, the Global Compact on Migration as well. So Ola, I look forward to your comments.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure being here and on this panel. So I would say a few words on mobility and how this can be perceived. And the Deputy Minister already spoke about the visa liberalization and this being a landmark. Of course, we see this as very important in also opening up legal pathways for people-to-people exchange. But this is, let's say, the more short-term ways of mobility. We also see patterns of migration and more long-term mobility in the EU, but also in the European partnership countries, and that is a kind of westward migration, where we see challenges in meeting the demands in the labor market, at least parts of the labor market, both in the EU member states, but also in the European partnership countries. One thing that is also significant in later time is the feminization of migration. There's more and more women migrating. Of course, those patterns offers opportunities and to some degree challenges, as the Belarusian Deputy Minister spoke about. The opportunities are obvious in terms of providing education, youth empowerment, but it also opens opportunities to learn in the labor market. It gives opportunities for remittances, and that is not just financial remittances, but also remittances in terms of skills. But there are also challenges in terms of human capital and retaining human capital, enhancing human capital. Of course, there are possible ways forward in tapping into the opportunities of this. I think one would be enhanced cooperation with the diaspora for investment, for commercial ties, and for trade. I think we've seen this in other regions before, and I think this is something worth looking at. Another item would be circular migration. The Deputy Minister spoke about this, and I think also the President mentioned it in her keynote speech yesterday. So this is something which would be very welcome to look into more. I think also to facilitate safe, orderly and regular migration overall is important. And this is not necessarily about opening up new pathways, looking at the legal framework. It's more about procedures to facilitate, making it easier to come and go, to have multi-entry stays. And it's all about making migration regular rather than irregular. Another area is to cooperate on international recruitment. We have together with ILO a program called IRIS, which is facilitating. This is in the interest of the migrants, but I think also in the interest of the employers in terms of CSR is very important. We also need to look at ways of mainstreaming migration into the development plans. This is particularly mentioned in the SDG 10.7. And we need to make sure that there is sustainable engagement, including funding over the next multi-annual financial framework. There is also the mobility partnership that has been mentioned. We think we need to look into what would be the mobility partnerships 2.0. And coming back to your question on the Global Compact, this is of course a state-led process which was negotiated by states, and the implementation is with states. IOM stands perfectly ready to assist states in their implementation of the Global Compact. It forms a very good basis for merging partnerships. We think it is a very useful menu to look at how can we cooperate in the area of migration. We are also working together with the other UN organizations within the UN Migration Network for Migration, which has been formed this year. We stand as the convener of this and also the secretariat, but this is very much a cooperative exercise. So again, we think that it's very worthwhile looking at the Global Compact to get impetus into bringing this forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ola, and particularly for that last part as well. So it is very shortly going to be the time to open up the floor for questions, and I know from being here yesterday that there is enthusiastic participation from the floor. But as Meredith mentioned earlier, we have a number of our youth ambassadors from Georgia here. And in particular, we have one who is going to make a contribution. Given the eagle-eyed amongst you may have noticed that the panel that is talking about the younger generation and mobility in education, we none of us are particularly young. So I am very grateful that you will now make a contribution. Have you got a microphone? Good.
Thank you very much, dear moderator, dear speakers. Thank you. Thank you for inviting, and I'm honored to represent Young European Ambassadors Initiative in Georgia. I am Nina Toriashvili, national focal point of Young European Ambassadors in Georgia, a voluntary initiative by EU Neighbors East project. Young European Ambassadors, or YAs, is a voluntary initiative which started in 2016 with only 100 young European ambassadors, volunteer activists, to share information about the European Union and the importance of the Eastern Partnership among their countries. But right now we have up to 500 young people in our network in each 6 partner countries and as well as in the EU. Well, in Georgia we have 68 young European ambassadors. Some of them are represented here. What we do in Eastern Partnership countries and in particular in Georgia? Well, our main goal is to raise awareness among our peers about the European Union, its history, our shared values, and about the Eastern Partnership Initiative. As well as we share information about the EU4Youth opportunities which are available for Georgian youth in the field of education and mobility. And I am proud to say that most of us have been benefited from several EU4Youth programs, and we came back to our countries to share it to our peers. And we want to promote our common values and make our peers aware that the Eastern Partnership region and the EU share several values among each other. And during our missions, we met young people in Georgia in rural areas, from Kakheti, which is the eastern part of Georgia, from Kakheti to Samegrelo. And our very recent activity was 2 days ago in Batumi prior to the conference, where we met young people at Europe Square, and we engaged with them with several quizzes and sharing information, opportunities, etc. and etc. How can we contribute to the youth empowerment? How we youth can contribute to our empowerment in the region? Well, besides sharing information and opportunities and our knowledge and experience, which will obviously help the young people in their personal and professional development, we can also, as the group of young European ambassadors, particularly in Georgia, can give feedback about specific needs and challenges the young people face in several regions. And I'm sure that the young European ambassadors in each respective countries can share their views as well. Well, for instance, I have several examples in mind. In Kwemokartli, Tatriskaro municipality, we we visited 10 schools, and there was issues with the school infrastructure. The young people need better infrastructure to be for their better education. Well, in Marneuli, local young girls need to be empowered more, not to, because they sometimes feel left alone against several gender misperceptions. Well, in Kareli, there is an urgent need of local community organization for young people and a space for them to have a possibility to gather and discuss the development of their region. And well, in Batumi, for example, we met local young people who have several ideas, but they need more trainings about the EU4 business opportunities. How can they develop their ideas, their entrepreneurship ideas, and make them into actions? And why do we do that? Because we believe that if we have more like-minded and empowered young people around us in Georgia and Eastern Partner region, we will be stronger together, as it is our motto. And thank you very much once again for inviting us here and give us opportunity to present this initiative in front of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nino. And now we're going to go to the questions. And again, what I will do is I will take questions in groups of 3. So what I am also going to ask, I have 3 requests of the people that are asking questions. 1, give your name and where your organization, if that's appropriate. 2, I'm going to ask you, as the speakers have very kindly done, which is to keep your question to a question and to keep it brief. And 3, I would ask you to direct your question to a specific member of the panel, so then I can hold them to account as well as you. And again, I am going to ask the first 3 questions to come from the youth ambassadors as well, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mariam Khudashvili, Young European Ambassador from Georgia. And it's a huge honor and privilege to be here and discuss youth-related issues with you. Addressing the last question stated in the program, what are the opportunities still to be exploited? From 2020, I would like to outline the last one, the 20th one, which is as follows. Integrate Eastern Partnership and EU research and innovation systems and programs. As Schools and University Outreach Coordinator, I'm obliged to say that Georgian universities very much lack research bases, research initiatives, and opportunities. Accordingly, passionate, bright-minded, creative, cool students face the harsh reality of leaving the country and contribute to the development and innovation abroad. So my question is as follows. Please share your viewpoint how the research and innovation systems could be integrated in EAP more precisely in Georgian universities to make creative minds stay, study, research, and bring tangible benefits to their own society. Thank you.
Thank you. And who in particular would you like to respond to that?
Please, to
the Minister. Right. Thank you. Second question.
Hello, and thank you very much for your fruitful presentations and inputs. I'm Georgi Agirbaya, a Young European Ambassador and founder of Proactive Group Georgia, which is a youth organization. And my question would address to the Deputy Minister of the Education, Science, Sport and Culture. As you know, that we hear a lot of times that you are #1 priorities and top priorities, but we have several challenges to raise. According to the history of 2017, since we closed the Ministry of Youth and Sport Affairs, later we combined now against this youth component, couldn't find the proper space. Now it's under somehow Prime Minister department. How could you see the development and strategy of cooperation maybe, because it's a kind of, you don't see much developing under because there are Children and Youth Foundation under the ministry, but at the same time we have youth component which is not developing very much. So why it takes so long time to make this strategy and policy, because it's 2 different directions, education and youth policy. And one more thing is about the Erasmus, because one of the biggest successes, as we know, and we celebrate 30 years, that I personally experienced and benefited a lot of. Why we don't, what's the mechanism we have to control, monitor, how this effective, these people from the let's say decrease the brain drain from our country, because a lot of bright-minded young people all around Georgia. They look more opportunities abroad after the graduation from the alumni. What's the mechanism strategy to decrease this brain drain from Georgia? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuri. And the third question.
I am Sasa Chikladze, representing Young European Ambassador Initiative here. My question is concerning brain drain from a Georgian minority. In this case, let's concentrate on LGBT minority. On 8th of July, Tbilisi Pride held first ever Pride in Caucasus. What would you say? Can discrimination based on, in this case, sexual orientation, be one of the reasons of brain drain? For some time, some officials call LGBT group and its activists provocative and treacherous conspiracy aimed at Georgia and its citizens. My question is to Irina Abuladze and Nino Javakhadze.
Thank you very much. So I think, Irina, the first two questions were very much focused towards you, so I'd welcome your responses.
Thank you. I'm very glad to see that our youth is so active and they posed the very significant and very wide questions on on exact opportunities we are going to be providing to the youth on with the aim of the not only the youth but the overall country development. Of course. So the questions on the integration of the youth and giving the more opportunities to youth in science and innovation. Again, so I just mentioned that the opportunities provided through the EU support, which is again, Erasmus or the Horizon 2020 or other support initiatives from other international partners as World Bank and others. So what the challenge we're facing, one of the challenges we're facing right now, of course, is that on the one hand, there is the opportunity from the international support that is not properly utilized by us in general, which requests more coordination on the governmental level between the line ministries. And here is the Ministry of Economy on the GITA, which proposed recently a very ambitious and large-scale training program for youth and for the startups and to develop the small and medium-sized businesses in the country. And we are now discussing on how to make sure that this coordination between the two ministries, as the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Education, better can serve to activate youth, because what we need is to identify the talented youth that already exist in the regions. And for that, this is maybe replicates the second question asked on how we can make sure that youth is activated in the regions. What is the coordination mechanisms under the Prime Minister or under the ministries or under the municipalities even. But the next is to how we make sure that the youth is well-skilled and trained so that all the opportunities provided by ministries or the international partners are utilized. So our aim is, one, to train more youth and to provide more and more information sessions through the GITA or the ministries on the opportunities that exist already and support young population in innovation, in startups, in creation their own companies or developing the products through the networking with business sector and of course the science population. So very soon we will be providing the action plan through the end of this year on how to make sure that more and more opportunities are given to the youth and how the municipalities and the regions can contribute to that. And actually that was the logic when we started to negotiate and discuss on what is the better structure for the component of the youth in the whole system, because as you know, the ministries merged in September, the Ministry of Culture and Sports with the Ministry of Education and Science. And of course, the youth component was one of the important part of these discussions, and that's why the decision has been made to move it to the Prime Minister's level, because you know that the association agreement we are committed to fulfill to is of course highlighting the importance of the decentralization of the services. In order to provide more and more opportunities to youth in the regions, we need to make sure that the municipalities are stronger than now. So that's why we decided, the government has decided, the Prime Minister made the decision to move this component under his kind of umbrella, to make sure that the regions and the municipalities and governors became more strong in managing the youth issues, because you agree that the ministry, none of the ministries from the capital city can manage the regional issues and identify the talented youth in the regions. That's why I think that is vital, to move the youth issues under the Prime Minister's level, so that the coordination among the line ministries and, what importantly, with the municipalities becomes more strong. But now we are in the process, so we are in the transition phase. Actually, almost all the legislative changes are completed, but this will be the process to set up the new coordination mechanisms and kind of the structure under the Prime Minister, which will be dealing with the youth issues and coordinating that component. I think, and plus there was the question about the Erasmus Plus and the brain drain. So again, and Nino mentioned that, and myself, so our aim is to make sure that we have very visible mechanisms in place in student exchanges on every level, in schools, in vocational education, in higher education, to make sure that we in this country providing high-level education, this is first, but second, we enable the mechanisms, the formal and legitimate mechanisms for the mobility, where we make sure that the students are moving, I mean the lifelong learning principles, which are actually the basis for us in education reforms as well, should provide this kind of mobility. But you cannot kind of limit opportunities to your students to go abroad and to obtain more education and skills, right? So what we need to do actually is to provide more and more opportunities here, because one thing is that we send our students to have more degrees, international degrees abroad, but we need to make sure that when they come back, they have proper employability and professional development opportunities. I think to us, the next agenda will be to see what are the opportunities in the country, in the regions, to obtain and to observe all the education and skills potentials that are with our students, and to work more and more with international programs to issue the dual degree programs, so that our students do not need necessarily to travel abroad to obtain the high quality education here in Georgia.
Thank you, Irina. And I think the last question on brain drain was also had specific element in it in relation to communities within Georgia, explicitly the LGBT community as well.
Right. Thank you very much for the question. Let me start from a bit beginning, but I will be short, I promise. So the protection of rights of different vulnerable groups is very important for us. And as you're probably aware, we as a Ministry of Internal Affairs have created a special department for human rights protection last year. I wouldn't say that we have perfect results, but we have some results already during this 1 year. And precisely, we have results in terms of the better investigation of the crimes committed on the basis of discrimination, to identify the discriminating motive in a crime. And also, the most important thing, I think, is that to promote a sensitive approach towards different minority groups among the police officers when it comes to a protection of human rights. I believe your question extends to an issue of the LGBT pride as well. This is a much debated issue in Georgia. We have a very close cooperation with LGBT community, almost everyday communication. On the issue of the pride, we had quite live discussions, the arguments, I would say, that we explained to them all the risks that we observed and the security risks. Eventually, it ended up the way it ended up, but I would say that's a multitask issue to improve the quality of the protection of the LGBT rights in Georgia and to increase their visibility. I think that it's a job to be done by the government, on the level of the government and the parliament. And because it's always, and we have discussed that many times, it's always a failed, I would say, attempt when this is, all this issue is just limited in the frames of the responsibility of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. When it's something already to be heavily protected, it's already not, I would say, that much of a freedom of expression already. So I think it's much work to be done in that direction by the whole government and the parliament. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nino. Right. A further 3 questions, if you could indicate. I have 3 questions over here. Becca first. And if you could again explain who your question is particularly directed to.
Hello again. My name is Beka Nazrishvili. I'm an independent member of the parliament. As a politician, I have less questions. I have more comments. So. Irina touched it already, this issue about brain drain. I would like to reflect on Belarus situation. Our problem is not that salaries are low in Georgia. They are low salaries, but main problem is the structure of the economy. If the country's leading economic sector is the tourism, the country does not need high qualified people because anyway, it does not matter what kind of qualifications they will get from higher education system. They could not find any kind of job here. That is a problem. That's why the people with a high education leave the country, not because of salaries, not only because of salaries, but because they could not find the proper jobs in Georgia. That is the biggest problem. Now the question is, if the government is going to spend, and I support this idea, okay? If the government is going to spend 6% of GDP for education, and at the same time he's signing also some agreements with different countries about circular migration for high qualified people, it does not mean that we are financing economy of another different countries. So this is a big problem, because the Prime Minister proudly announced that they achieved this agreement with Germany, with, I don't know, with France, with even Portugal, that high qualified people could participate in their labor market officials, so they get the work permission in these countries. And this is the biggest problem. Our biggest challenge is the structure of our economy. The structure of our economy could not absorb the high qualified people, not only because of salaries, but high qualified job does not exist in Georgia. Thank you very much. That's why if somebody from the Ministry of Economy would attend this panel, it would be better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Becca. Gentleman here. We're getting a microphone to you.
Thank you very much. My name is Georgi Baramidze. I'm a first Minister of Interior of previous government. So I have one comment and one question to the Deputy Minister. On migration. Migration occur when people, of course, want to go out of the country and stay as immigrants because they cannot find appropriate life in the country. Unfortunately, in 2012, Georgia's economy was $16 billion, and 7 years later is less than $16 billion. So in 7 years, Georgia's economy shrinked. So it's very clear why people want to go out of this country, and it's hundreds of thousands of people, unfortunately. And then my question to Deputy Minister, as we know, unfortunately, opposition been denied the opportunity to speak among panelists, and we couldn't hear in this conference voice of opposition. And but situation in this country is quite tense, as you know. These days we have demonstrations outside of this building, and we have 20 days of demonstration of young people demanding resignation of the Minister of Interior because of tragic events, so-called Gavrilov Bloody Night. We heard yesterday Minister of Interior Affairs said that I'm taking full responsibility what's happened, and we know that lethal bullets, rebel bullets, were used, and many young people lost their eyes. So what is the responsibility of your minister when he is going to resign? Thank you.
Thank you. And a third question from the lady just behind you.
A question about education for a change. I think it's great that Georgia is looking to expand its emphasis on inclusive education and also to look towards more equality of opportunities for young people. I'm sorry, I have forgotten to introduce myself. I'm Maria Golubeva from the Latvian Parliament, also formerly education policy analyst. The question is to the engineer, actually. It's great that Erasmus Plus has become more inclusive recently, and it includes also more exchanges between schools and vocational schools. And it's also great that Eastern Partnership policies help a lot at the level of higher education and mobility, but I still think that maybe that's too little too late. Looking at the PISA trends in the region, it seems like there is a need for paradigm shift to invest much more in helping countries like Georgia, which want to expand their emphasis on younger children's access to education and equal opportunities, to look more at supporting and bolstering education policy at the levels when it really matters for many young people and children in less privileged areas. So less of the higher achievers support and more of support for those who need it most and who get the least investment. What do you think about that? Thank you.
Thank you very much, and for bringing us back to education. I think on the first two questions, then, the Deputy Ministers, obviously we don't have anyone here from the Economy Ministry, but Irina, if you'd care to take the first one.
Okay, so the big about the brain drain and the circular migration and the whole the economic structure of the country. Of course, unfortunately, I'm not able to discuss it in all the details because of the short time and because of I'm not representing the Ministry of Economy. But I could say very briefly that, again, I completely agree that we need to make sure to invest in people's skills development, not only in the tourism sector, because we just saw the recent development in our country, and we need to make sure that we diversify our opportunities so that the country is not only depending on one particular sector. when it comes to the economic development, and that is the aim, of course, and that's why I mentioned the new developments with JITA on the small and medium-sized business developments in all sectors, and particularly in innovation and technology. Of course, we need to mention the recent figures on the decrease of the unemployment rates in comparison to the fierce rates, which shows that, and we do the very careful analysis about the sectors, which sectors are in potentially having the potential to absorb more and more skill force. And this is not only tourism but other fields. And I agree that we need more coordination and master plan with the Ministry of Economy to make sure that the prioritization of the vocational education program development or investing in the science and technology, of course, is aligned with the potential of and the needs of economic development of this country. And of course, the increase in funding in education, it's not only in education, but broadly in human capital development, which also means the infrastructure development, support of the private sector and small and medium-sized businesses, support of youth in becoming more innovative and competitive. And when it comes to the migration and circular migration, of course, this is to create more and more opportunities to our citizens to travel legally, to develop professionally in European countries and other countries, and to come back and to become more competitive for this country. And this is investing in people, in our citizens, to serve to economic development of this country. So this could be this small comment on this regard.
Thank you, Irina. Nina.
Thank you. With all due respect to Mr. Baramidze, who was actually, as far as I remember, his last position in the government was State Minister for European Integration. So I think he has much to say about European integration. I don't think that this is a format for political debates, and I do respect the audience here, so I will not comment on that question. Thank you.
Thank you, Nina. Lawrence, there was a question directed specifically to you.
Thank you very much for the question. I mean, the first thing I would say is I'm really pleased to see that education is such a high priority, both here in Georgia, but also across the Eastern Partnership. I think governments increasingly recognize that this is a fundamental pillar for further economic development in the Eastern Partnership region. Secondly, it's very clear, as you quite rightly say, that requires a full education strategy. That's, of course, the responsibility of the individual governments, first and foremost. And then I think it's fully agree that vocational education and training must be an essential part of that. Traditionally, it's at least 75% of students are rather on the vocational side than the higher education side, so absolutely essential. We are providing very substantial support of over 80 million euros across the region in precisely this: how do you bring the labor market and the skills better together? In terms of preschool, early school years, absolutely fully agree on the analysis that it's an essential part, and that's coming through ever more clearly in contemporary educational policy. Then the question is who's best placed to support it? And I mean, traditionally, this has not been an area where the European Union has invested. It's an area where the World Bank has done an awful lot of work, and we work together as an international community. So it's also about complementarity, but fully agree on the analysis. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, if the questions are very brief and to the point, then I think we can take another quick round before breaking for lunch, if indeed we have further questions. Okay, in which case we do have time for the panel to make some concluding remarks and comments before we go to lunch at 1 o'clock. And what I'm going to do is ask you to speak in turn. So I will start with Nina.
Well, thank you very much. Once again, on few issues that were raised here, from my economic background, I would say that the skills will go where they will be used. So if we want to prevent the brain drain and migration, we need to create opportunities here. This is 2 + 2. Economic development is the recipe, I would say. For visa liberalization, once again, that's a great achievement. Although I agree with my colleague, it's rather short term. It's designed for a short-term visits, and we have to work on further integration. And of course, the primary goal would be our membership to European Union. That's, I think, the choice, the political choice and the historical choice of Georgia. Thank you.
Thank you, Nino. Evgeny, and one thing I also would welcome you touching on in your concluding remarks is about the communication and the cooperation that happens across the Eastern partner countries in this area as well.
You know, just as a conclusion, I'd like to share maybe a universal idea that sometimes is a bit silly, but there are 6 countries in the Eastern Partnership. We all are very different. We all have our own goals, etc. For example, the Georgian goal is to enter European Union. We are not opting just for the membership in the European Union in the shortest period time. But what I'm sure, and the result of today's discussion, is that social, educational, migration questions are core questions of every state at this period of time. And all these questions are by this or that are based on the development of the economy of the state. So if we as representatives of the government will focus on, let's say, resolving these questions, I believe the more flourishing our people will be. That's my idea.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Evgeny. Irina.
So back to the panels, the main issue on the brain drain and how we can make sure to prevent it on one hand, but on the other hand, to direct our human potential to the economic development of this country and EAP countries. Of course, one thing is which comes to my mind, and I agree completely with Nina, opportunities. We need to provide the opportunities. Otherwise, you cannot just limit and prevent the chances of the youth to obtain the education and skills and better chances somewhere else. So first is the opportunities. We need to make sure that all our line ministries and the municipalities provide the opportunities to youth here in Georgia to obtain better quality education and employment. And I also highlight the importance of the stronger collaboration with the Ministry of Economy with other line ministries to see the clear potential in every sector of this country to provide these employment opportunities and to align our education goals and priorities in investing in education sectors, in vocational education, science development, or other parts of education aligned to the economic development goals of these countries and directions. And of course, partnerships with the EAP countries, institution partnerships with Eastern Partnership countries. We just had a very good visit in Belarus of our ministry. So there is so much to share. These countries have so much experience in different sectors. We need to make sure that this experience from our Eastern Partnership countries are applied to the relevant sectors, and of course to make sure that the Eastern Partnership countries are supported through EU to have more and more better quality education training services in their respective countries, so that youth is given these opportunities. Of course, again, the circular migration could be the solution in case when we are not able to provide these opportunities in particular sectors in our countries, but to make sure that we legally and formally have mechanisms in place when we control the brain drain issues in a way that our skilled workforce can go abroad, obtain even more skills, and come back and to serve to our respective countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. Lawrence, your concluding comments.
Thanks, Claire. 3 quick points. First, it's about creating new opportunities, and that means building on the strengths. And on this economic point, I would underline that when you look over the 10 years of the Eastern Partnership, there's a very clear trend that with each and every Eastern partner country, trade with the European Union has increased over that period, and increased in a number of cases quite substantially. That's about creating opportunities and creating new jobs. And we've discussed already and that needs to be not so much in the capitals, but out in the regions. And I think that's really important, and we have a strategy in place to do that. Secondly, clearly the main focus today was about investing in youth and education. I hope we managed to convince you that it's our top priority. It's the top priority, I believe, also of the Eastern Partnership governments, and that now we need to deliver. We've got lots in place to do that. And thirdly and finally, I'm going to end on the point that this is, we're in this phase of a consultation, and it's exciting to discuss the future. So I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to listen to all of you, and in particular to the youth, because as we've got this consultation on the future of the Eastern Partnership beyond 2020, that's open till the end of October, till the end of the mandate of the current EU institutions, we want to hear from you. So websites are going up, we're in listening mode, and this is very much part of it. It's been a pleasure to be here in Batumi, and thanks very much.
Thank you, Lawrence. And finally, Ola.
Well, thank you very much. I would like to come back to a few points that I made earlier and I think has been reiterated by some of the other panelists. And one thing is, of course, to make migration regular, safe, orderly, and also make it circular as much as possible to be able to tap into the skills that have been achieved by youth and others. So look at circular migration patterns, make it easy to go back and forth. And the second point I would like to make is also to work with the diaspora, and that is to enhance investments and different kinds of remittances. So those were the points that I would like to make at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ola, and thank you for all of your concluding comments from what I think is a really important subject area and an excellent debate from this morning. So we're now going to break for lunch. Lunch will be served downstairs, and then I would ask everyone to be back in here for 2 p.m. this afternoon so we can start on time for the next session. And finally, I would like you all to share with me your demonstration of thanks to the panelists for their full contribution this morning. Thank you.